A rose with no scent, but a stench of murder, lingered. Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I am your host, Axon. Where in the world are you joining us from today? Drop it in the comments. It's always a joy to read your messages. Thanks for being here. Let's get into it. If there's one thing guaranteed to keep Nero Wolfe in his chair besides the gravitational pull of 10 extra pounds a decade, it's routine. Monday mornings at the brownstone are a smooth blend of orchid misting, Fritz's coffee, and Wolfe's general disdain for the outside world. So when the doorbell rang at precisely 9:36 a.m., an unspeakable hour for uninvited guests, my eyebrows went up like Fritz's soufflé when Wolfe skips lunch. I was at my desk, filing expense receipts from a dry but lucrative tail job in New Rochelle. Wolfe was in the plant rooms upstairs, discussing the intimate needs of an epiphytic orchid with Theodore, which I could only assume involved more molybdenum than a sane man should care about. The bell rang again. I looked at it, then at the door, then at the hallway as if expecting Fritz to magically appear. He did. I opened it. The woman standing there had the kind of face that would make a war veteran forget his medals and a banker forget his balance sheet. Not beautiful, exactly, too angular. But she had poise, and more importantly, she had purpose. She held a small square box in both hands, like it was the Ark of the Covenant. "Mr. Wolfe, please," she said. "Which one?" I asked. "The one with opinions about wine pairings, or the one who gets the door?" She didn't smile, not even a twitch. "Mr. Nero Wolfe. It's urgent." "They all say that," I muttered, and let her in. She didn't wait for the elevator. She followed me to the office with a calm stride. As if she'd paced these rugs in her dreams, I buzzed the intercom. "Yes, there's a visitor," I said. "Human, female, bearing a box and an expression Wolfe would call earnest, and I'd call double-edged. She says it's urgent." A pause. "Bring her." She stepped into the office like she'd rehearsed it. No gawking at the books, no glancing at the globe. She walked to the red chair facing Wolfe's, stopped, and waited. She didn't sit. Wolfe, having lowered himself into his own chair after the short pilgrimage from the orchids, observed her through hooded lids. He grunted. "My name is Miranda Vale," she said. "I'm a horticulturist. I specialize in antique varietals and floral genetics. This," she set the box gently on Wolfe's desk, "is the problem." I took the hint and opened the lid. Nestled inside was a single rose, white, edged faintly in crimson. Not a wilt, not a bruise. It was perfect. "Except, where's the smell?" I asked. "Exactly," she said. Wolfe made a small motion with his finger. I lifted the rose and brought it closer to him. He sniffed. Then again. His nose wrinkled. "A rose of this variety should have a distinct, spicy musk," he said. "This is odorless. Artificial?" "No," Miranda said. "Grown in my greenhouse, from a cultivar that has never before lacked scent." "And you've brought this anomaly here," Wolfe said, "because you believe it to be more than a fluke." "I believe someone tampered with it," she said. "Not the plant, the process." The rose was meant to be submitted to the Westmore Prize panel. It was going to win. Until this happened. I raised a brow. "Someone sabotaged a rose. That's a new one." "It's not the rose," she said, her voice tightening. "It's what it means. The formula, the breeding sequence is proprietary. My father's, he passed it to me before he died. If someone's replicated it, or worse, ruined it, they've destroyed more than a flower. They've destroyed a legacy." Wolfe leaned back. "I do not deal in botany disputes. Take this to your guild or your academic council." She didn't flinch. "My greenhouse was broken into 2 nights ago. Nothing was stolen, but 2 pots were moved. One of them contained the twin to this rose, and this morning my assistant, Jonas Trammell, left without a word. Vanished. His phone's off and the police won't do a thing unless there's blood on the floor." Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction wider. I knew that look. It was the mental equivalent of him leaning forward, which he would never physically do. You suspect Jonas of betrayal, he asked. I don't know, she said. But the prize panel votes in 5 days. If I can't prove this rose was sabotaged, my submission is invalid. And if Jonas sold our breeding method to one of the other competitors, she trailed off. I need this cleared. Quietly and accurately. I turned to Wolfe. Shall I assume you're still not interested? Wolfe studied the rose like it had confessed to murder. Mr. Goodwin, he said finally, arrange for the other sample, the twin, to be brought here under lock and key, and compile the names of the prize competitors. All of them. Also the board members. I wish to know what kind of nincompoops are entrusted with judging floral quality. Is that a yes? Miranda asked. It is not a no, Wolfe said. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure which surprised me more, that someone was messing with roses or that Wolfe had agreed to care. Then again, the last time someone sent him a perfumed letter, it had contained a puzzle he still muttered about 4 years later. Maybe he smelled trouble, even if the rose didn't. The box containing the unscented rose was still on Wolfe's desk when I returned from seeing Miranda Vale out. She'd offered a brief nod and a thank you that had all the warmth of a north-facing greenhouse in February, then vanished down the stoop without another word. Either she was keeping things close to the vest or her idea of charm school had involved pruning shears. When I stepped back into the office, Wolfe hadn't moved. He was gazing at the rose the way he might regard a porterhouse that had arrived raw. Well? I asked. He didn't respond. That was my cue. Want me to call her greenhouse and arrange a pickup on the twin bloom? Yes, he said, finally. Specify precautions. It must not be handled without gloves or allowed to interact with this one. Also, I want photographs, high resolution, of both specimens in situ before transfer, and the competitor list. Start with the panelists, Wolfe said. You'll find them through the Westmore Prize Association. I recall their headquarters is on East 64th. Retrieve the names of all current judges, then proceed to the list of entrants. I gave a mock salute and headed for the phone. Saul Panzer could probably dig it up faster, but Wolfe didn't want the heavy artillery just yet. He wanted me sniffing around first, preferably in person, with a good pair of shoes and a decent tie. While I waited for someone at the Westmore Association to stop transferring me between departments like a hot potato, Fritz arrived to remove the coffee service. He eyed the rose in its box, gave me a subtle arch of the brow, and mouthed, "A case?" I nodded. His lips tightened in approval. Fritz liked anything that made Wolfe behave like a functioning member of society. Eventually, I landed a secretary, with a voice like she'd been trained by an answering machine. I introduced myself, gave her Wolfe's name, and requested the list of current Westmore judges and registered competitors for the upcoming prize. She paused for a minute, probably Googling whether we'd ever sued anyone, then offered to email the public roster. When the email hit my inbox a few minutes later, I printed it and brought it over to Wolfe. He flicked his eyes across the list as if it were a restaurant menu in a city he didn't respect. Recognize any of them? I asked. I recognize 3, he said. Edwin Fell, noted for hybridizing tulips into atrocities. Marie Betts, whose series on aromatic evolution in night-blooming jasmine was tolerable, and Lionel Quarles, a fraud. That narrows it down. He didn't bother replying. I'll head to Miranda's greenhouse next, I said. Want me to check in with the assistant's neighbors too? Indeed. Ascertain the circumstances of Jonas Trammell's disappearance, determine whether it was voluntary, and obtain a photograph. I won't rely on Miss Vale's account of his character or conduct. Got it. I had Fritz pack me a sandwich to go and hit the pavement. Miranda's business, Vale Floriculture, was in a part of Brooklyn that had gentrified just enough to smell like fresh bread and regret. The greenhouse was tucked behind a row of converted brownstones. A narrow alley led to a sleek glass structure that looked like a boutique spa for begonias. The assistant who answered the door was not Jonas Trammell. She was maybe 20, freckled, and wore gloves dusted with soil and something that looked like powdered graphite. I'm Sylvie, she said when I introduced myself. Miranda told me you might come by. You want the other rose? That and whatever you know about Jonas. She nodded and led me into the greenhouse. The air smelled like chlorophyll, damp clay, and something sharp beneath it. Fertilizer, probably. She took me to a climate-controlled glass box near the rear wall. Inside was the twin of the scentless rose, nearly identical except for a faint yellow blush on the petals. Still smells right, Sylvie said, removing a small vent cap and letting the aroma waft through. It hit me. Rich, heady, like cinnamon cut with clove, a punch in the nostrils compared to the sterile one in Wolfe's office. You've kept this locked up since the incident. I have. Miranda was clear. I nodded. Can I take it with me? She hesitated. She said only if you brought a proper carrier. I showed her the foam-lined floral transport box. Wolfe had sent ahead with a courier. Good to see the man believed in planning for the inevitable. Once we secured the twin rose and Sylvie locked the greenhouse again, I steered her to a bench and pulled out my note. Now let's talk Jonas. She glanced down at her gloves. He's quiet, usually. Smart, too. He's the one who designed our irrigation scheduler from scratch. Any tensions, arguments, bad vibes. Miranda got impatient with him sometimes, especially when he questioned her formulas. But Jonas didn't fight. He just absorbed things, thought a lot. When did you last see him? 2 nights ago. We closed up at 7. He left to catch the train. Never came back. Could he have taken anything? Notes? Samples? She bit her lip. He had access to the seed archives and the chemical logbooks. But Miranda keeps the actual formula for the Vale Rose locked in a separate cabinet. Did you check to see if it's still there? She did. It hasn't been touched. That didn't rule out memorization or photography, but I didn't press it yet. You got a photo of him? She pulled out her phone and showed me a group shot. Jonas, lean and pale, with wireframe glasses and a look of someone who could recite Latin binomials in his sleep. Not the type to run unless he had reason. I left with the rose, a flash drive of greenhouse footage, Sylvie's idea, and Jonas's face burned into memory. By the time I made it back to the brownstone, it was past 6. Wolfe was at the table, consuming trout. All mundane, like it was a hostile negotiation. I placed the sealed rose box on the sideboard and briefed him over dinner. When I got to Sylvie's commentary, he looked mildly pleased. When I mentioned Jonas's coding ability, he raised a brow. A botanist and a programmer. Intriguing. Yeah, I said, and apparently capable of vanishing without a ripple. Not without motive, Wolfe murmured. Find the motive, and you'll find the man. He stabbed a green bean. Tomorrow, he added, you will visit Edwin Fell. I wish to know whether the possibility of foul play extends beyond Miss Vale's suspicion. Lovely, I said. Nothing like cross-examining a tulip tycoon. Wolfe dabbed his lips with his napkin and leaned back. This is not about a rose, he said. This is about pride, and theft, and perhaps vengeance. The rose is merely the bait. I poured myself a post-dinner brandy and looked at the 2 identical blooms, one fragrant, one muted. If Wolfe was right, someone had figured out how to mutilate a flower without leaving fingerprints. I just had to figure out why. By 9, the next morning I was threading my way through midtown traffic en route to Edwin Fell's private nursery, a penthouse-level operation with the kind of rooftop garden that made the Sunday Society pages squeal. The man didn't just grow tulips, he curated them like Fabergé eggs with roots. According to Wolfe, Fell had once described his latest hybrid as a revolution in upright moral color. I didn't know what that meant, but I already didn't like him. The building was a converted pre-war co-op, and the elevator was the sort that required a key or a degree in polite bribery. I settled for the former, thanks to a doorman who called up to Fell's assistant, then nodded me through like I'd passed a citizenship test. The rooftop opened into a sun-drenched greenhouse, with the faint smell of ozone and freshly turned earth. I was greeted by a man whose shirt fit a little too perfectly for comfort, clean jaw, clean nails, and a name tag that said Bryce. He ushered me toward a curved bench beneath a trellis of something aggressively orange, and introduced Mr. Fell with the soft gravity reserved for royalty or temperamental chefs. Fell emerged from the greenery like a prize peacock, tall, wiry, and dressed in pale linen. Despite the New York humidity, he extended a dry hand with studied reluctance. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "your employer is a man of rare discriminating interest." I confess I'm puzzled by his sudden concern with the Westmore affair. "Wolfe has been known to take an interest when something stinks," I said. "In this case, literally." Fell lifted one amused brow. "So Miss Vale's rose finally lost its scent. That's one way to put it. You seem well informed. I keep track of my competitors. And are you one this year?" He gave a modest shrug, which looked rehearsed. "I submit, as I do every season, though I hardly expect to win. My varieties are not, shall we say, vulgar enough to capture the panel's imagination, meaning the Westmore Prize has begun favoring showy mutants over true pedigree. Miranda Vale's bloom, while technically impressive, is a loud thing. She breeds for punch, not longevity. She's the floral equivalent of an advertising jingle. Not a fan, then." "I respect her drive," he said smoothly. "But she's not her father. Interesting you bring him up. He was the one who developed the breeding sequence Miranda claims was compromised." Fell gave me a long, narrow look. "So that's the theory. That someone got hold of old Vale's secrets. Someone broke into her greenhouse. Her assistant disappeared the same night. The rose she submitted for the prize came out smelling like a tax form." Fell's mouth twitched. "Do you think I'm the type to commit floral espionage? I think anyone in line for a prize with money and prestige attached is the type to want an edge." He leaned back. "Let me save you the trouble of probing. I haven't spoken to Jonas Trammell in over a year." "Who said anything about Jonas?" He smiled thinly. "Miranda mentioned him at a panel last spring. Said he was working on a proprietary sequencing tool. I made an inquiry. He declined to meet. End of story. Got documentation of that inquiry." Fell's smile widened. "You think I commit my mischief to paper, Mr. Goodwin?" "No," I said, standing. "But if your nose is clean, you won't mind if I follow up with your staff." His expression pinched just enough to confirm I'd found the edge of his patience. "Bryce can show you the exit." I left with no evidence and a gut feeling that Edwin Fell wasn't telling me half of what he knew. Still, Wolfe wasn't expecting a signed confession, just breadcrumbs. And Fell had dropped enough attitude to qualify. Back at the brownstone, I walked into the office just in time to hear Wolfe on the phone with Saul Panzer. That alone told me things were heating up. Wolfe only called Saul when he needed something done with precision and plausible deniability. "Yes," Wolfe said. "The East 79th sublet. Confirm whether he moved out voluntarily, and if he didn't, find out who helped him disappear." He hung up without a goodbye. I dropped into my chair and gave him the rundown. "He's a smooth one," I said. "Knows Jonas by name, claims he reached out once and got turned down. Doesn't deny rivalry, but brushes off any motive." "He's lying," Wolfe said flatly. "A man of Fell's vanity does not admit to rejection unless it cloaks something deeper." The inquiry was real, but the brush-off? Fabricated. "Think he paid Jonas off?" "I think," Wolfe said, steepling his fingers, "that Jonas approached him." I blinked. "You think the assistant went rogue?" "Consider the sequence of events. Jonas had access to the Vale formula. He disappears without a trace the night the rose loses its scent. Not long before the prize is awarded. Miss Vale's claim hinges on theft or sabotage. But what if it was neither? You're suggesting he altered the rose on purpose? Not to sabotage, to test. To test what? His own innovation. A refinement of the formula. Possibly an enhancement, but flawed. He tampers with one rose, perhaps to compare results. He vanishes before he can correct the error, or before Miranda discovers it. That doesn't explain the break-in." "It does," Wolfe said. "The break-in was staged, by Jonas, or with his approval, a cover to distract from his experiment." I leaned back, trying to wrap my head around it. So what's the angle? He improves the sequence. Then he offers it elsewhere, quietly, for a price, or for recognition. Either he finds a buyer, or makes the mistake of approaching someone who wants him silenced. I whistled low, which means we're either looking for a seller or a corpse. Wolfe scowled. Don't be glib, Archie. Either possibility is distasteful. The phone rang. I answered. It was Saul. Archie. I've got something. Jonas didn't just vanish. He was seen leaving with a woman. Description. Brunette. Early 30s. Brown coat. Red scarf. Security camera caught them around 10:30 p.m. 2 blocks from his apartment. She was carrying a briefcase. He looked spooked. Any idea who she is? Working on it. I relayed the details to Wolfe. He closed his eyes, thinking. Get photographs from the footage, he said. And locate Lionel Calls. Another panelist? No. A rival breeder. Known for dramatics, he was sued by Miranda's father 6 years ago. Claimed to have reverse-engineered the veil sequence. The suit failed, but the grudge remains. I made a note. Wolfe reached for the box on the sideboard and opened it. The 2 roses, one fragrant, one not, sat side by side in their foam compartments, like a botanical yin and yang. He stared at them a moment, then said, There is a third party here, one we have not yet seen. Someone who knew enough to attempt manipulation, but not enough to mask the result. Whether that party is Jonas, or his employer, or his partner, remains to be seen. He snapped the box shut, but they will reveal themselves. Sabotage is sloppy, pride is not. And someone wanted to prove something, even if they didn't know what scent they were leaving behind. I didn't have an answer to that, but I knew the next step. Callers, Wolfe said. I stood, retrieved my coat, and glanced once more at the roses. It was shaping up to be a very thorny case. Calls's laboratory was not the sort of place where you'd expect to find genius or danger, but Wolfe had a knack for sending me into buildings that managed to drip with both. Lionel Calls had set up his operation in the East Village, in what had once been a school, and now looked like the result of an argument between an architect and a chemist. The nameplate on the door read Petal and Genome, which told me all I needed to know about the man's self-regard. A woman in a white lab coat and earbuds gave me a suspicious glance as I stepped inside. She was too busy pouring liquid into a series of beakers to bother with introductions. A sign nearby read Visitors must sign in, but the pen was missing, and the clipboard looked untouched. Lionel Corals, I said. He's in the back, she replied without looking up. Don't touch anything. I touched nothing, which was easy, because most of it looked like it might explode or melt my fingerprints. A row of petri dishes bloomed with eerie, unnaturally vibrant colors. Someone was clearly trying to reinvent photosynthesis from the ground up. I found Qualls hunched over a microscope in a chamber that resembled a sci-fi film set. He didn't hear me enter, so I waited, watching his fingers manipulate something so tiny it might have been theoretical. After a few seconds, he stood up and noticed me. I assume you're not from the Department of Agriculture, he said dryly. Archie Goodwin, I work for Nero Wolfe. That got his attention. He blinked twice, adjusted his glasses, and tried for a smile. It didn't quite land. I'm flattered. Or should I be concerned? Depends. Did you sabotage Miranda Vale's rose and help her assistant vanish into the ether? He chuckled. Ah, the dramatics begin. Qualls was shorter than I'd expected, with pale hair, dark circles under his eyes, and the kind of quick, skittish energy you get in people who've spent too much time talking to plants instead of people. I didn't touch Miranda's work, he said, moving to a small sink to rinse his hands. And I haven't spoken to Jonas Trammell in almost 2 years. 2 years is a long time, I said. And yet your name came up before hers did when Wolfe started building his suspect list. He glanced at me, then dried his hands slowly. I suppose that's because I've been accused of worse, he said. But if you're implying I had something to do with her submission losing its scent, you're barking up a very crowded tree. Everyone wants that prize. I just want to beat her fairly. Do you consider her a rival? I consider her an opportunist. Her father was a genius. She inherited a greenhouse and a reputation, but not the technique. What she's doing now is derivative at best. I moved closer to a wall, covered in scribbled diagrams, arrows, and Latin names that looked like they belonged in a wizard's spellbook. What were you working on when I walked in? A rose that can shift scent expression based on sunlight. Charming. And dangerous if you're trying to fake a flower's profile to win a contest. He scowled. You think I gave Jonas something that ruined Miranda's sample? Or that Jonas gave you something? Wolfe thinks someone was testing an experimental variation. Maybe your hands were cleaner than his. Quartz opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. He handed it to me. That's my work for the last 6 months. If I were trying to duplicate the veil sequence, I wouldn't be using Arabidopsis markers. Mind if I show this to Wolfe? Please do. He'll be the first person in weeks who might understand it. As I left, I noticed the woman in the front room watching me through a glass partition. She didn't wave, she didn't blink, but something about the red scarf hanging over her chair made me pause. Back at the brownstone, I found Wolfe in his chair. Eyes closed, fingers tented. Fritz was dusting bookshelves with the precision of a surgeon. The air was fragrant, not from the orchids, but from the 2 roses still sitting in their box on the sideboard. Quarles denies contact with Jonas. I reported. Says he's got no motive, no opportunity, and an alibi made out of gene markers. He gave me his logs. Wolfe opened his eyes. Do you believe him? He's prickly, but not stupid, and he's not sloppy. His workspace was cleaner than your meat slicer. Yet I saw a red scarf. Wolfe raised one brow. Front office. Draped on a chair behind a woman who wouldn't look me in the eye. Matches the description Saul gave of the woman Jonas was last seen with. Did you ask her name? She wasn't volunteering it. Wolfe gestured toward the phone. Call Saul. I did, and within 10 minutes Saul was on the line. Her name's Lena Farrow, he said. No criminal record, but a solid resume in biotech. She worked with Quarles 2 years ago at a lab in Boston. She's also Jonas's ex. I relayed that to Wolfe, who closed his eyes again and murmured. I waited, because that's what you do when Wolfe murmurs anything. He either drifts off or says something that changes the game. He chose the latter. Jonas did not sabotage Miranda's rose out of spite, Wolfe said. He did it out of confidence. He thought he'd improved the formula and sought validation. And Lena? Lena has the technical skill to analyze his changes, possibly even encouraged him. But if his formula failed, she'd want to cover it up, I finished. Or retrieve it, Wolfe said. If Jonas fled in embarrassment, or worse, if he collapsed under pressure, she might be the only one who knows where he went, or where he was going. I stood. You want me to go back and lean on her? No. Bring her here. I blinked. You want to summon someone who may have orchestrated genetic sabotage into your office? Yes, Wolfe said. She won't resist. She wants to control the narrative. She's already watching you. He paused. Inform Miss Vale as well. I want her present. What about calls? Later. I must be precise. I made the calls. Lena Farrow agreed to meet on behalf of the lab, which told me she was already preparing a performance. Miranda Vale was less enthusiastic, but agreed, likely fueled by the need for answers and the chance to watch Wolfe tear someone apart from behind a desk. An hour later, the chairs in Wolfe's office were filled. Lena sat with practiced poise, legs crossed, red scarf draped like a flag of ironic surrender. Miranda was tenser, arms crossed, jaw set. Wolfe didn't speak for the first minute, just observed. Lena stared back. Miranda stared at Lena. Finally Wolfe said, Miss Farrow, were you involved in the genetic modification of the rose Miss Vale submitted for the Westmore Prize? No, Lena said smoothly. I never touched it. Did you advise Jonas Trammell on a variation of the Vale sequence? She hesitated. We had theoretical discussions. Wolfe nodded. Did you instruct him to test those theories on an active cultivar? No. Miranda jumped in. He wouldn't do that without being pushed. He was cautious, too cautious. If he tampered with it, someone convinced him to. Lena turned to her. I didn't convince him. I warned him it was unstable. Wolfe's eyes glittered. Then why, he said, was he last seen with you carrying a briefcase, looking as though he feared he'd made a terrible mistake? Lena's face changed. Just slightly. She said nothing. Wolfe continued. You encouraged him to prove something. He did. It failed. He panicked. You tried to retrieve the damage. Where is he now? Lena looked down at her hands. I don't know, she said, quietly. Wolfe stared. Then I will find out. The room was silent. Outside, a police siren wailed in the distance. Inside, all I could hear was the quiet tick of the office clock and the weight of something beginning to tip. The rose had bloomed. Now we just had to follow the scent to wherever Jonas Trammell had gone, or been taken. It was close to midnight when I got the call. I'd been upstairs in my room, catching up on reports, while the city hummed like a distant machine outside the window. Fritz had long since retired, and Wolfe had retreated to his orchids after our tense session with Lena Farrow and Miranda Vale. I wasn't expecting anything more to shake loose until morning. The phone rang twice before I answered. Saul Panzer's voice came through clear, calm, and just short of urgent. Archie. I've got Jonas. That got me up right fast. Alive, shaken, not stirred. He's holed up in a flophouse near Canal Street, under the name T. Jonas. I got a tip from someone in the building who recognized his picture. He paid cash, no ID. I waited until I saw him myself. He's nervous, jumpy, and packing a suitcase, probably planning to bolt tonight. Did you talk to him? No. Thought you'd want him fresh. I thanked him and hung up. Wolfe wasn't in the mood for interruptions at that hour, unless someone had expired on the doorstep. But this wasn't the kind of information that could steep overnight like chamomile. I headed to the plant rooms. He was there, of course, standing over a Paphiopedilum that had decided to bloom early, muttering about climate fluctuations with the tone most men reserve for court testimony. Wolfe, I said from the threshold. Jonas Trammell's been found. Saul's watching him. Wolfe turned just enough to raise one eyebrow. He's at a rooming house on Canal Street. Under an alias, trying to vanish. That confirms it then, Wolfe said. Confirms what? That he is no mastermind. Merely a child who thought himself a chemist. He failed, panicked, and ran. Do we pick him up now? Wolfe thought for a moment, his fingers gently adjusting a leaf. Yes, but bring him here. Do not frighten him further. If he bolts, we may never hear the truth, which is how I found myself in Lower Manhattan at 1 a.m, standing in a hallway that smelled like wet socks and yesterday's soup. Saul nodded to me from his post outside room 4C. He's inside, he said. Lights off. He tried to slip out once, but I blocked the door. He knows someone's watching. Then it's time I gave him a friendly face. I knocked gently. Jonas, open up. My name's Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help you fix what went wrong. Silence. Then a voice, raw and tight. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Good, I said. Then let's make sure you don't. A few seconds passed. Then the door opened. Jonas Trammell looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His clothes were wrinkled, his face pale, and his eyes wide with that wired guilt that shows up when the adrenaline fades. He was clutching a battered leather case like it contained state secrets. I didn't ask what was in it, not yet. I brought him back in a cab. He didn't say a word the whole way, just stared out the window like the street lamps were jury members. When we arrived at the brownstone, he hesitated at the stoop. I didn't want to run, he muttered. But I thought if I could fix it first. Save it for Wolfe, I said. He's the one who can actually pass a confession longer than 5 words. Inside, Fritz took one look at Jonas, and went to the kitchen, probably preparing hot cocoa or a sedative. I ushered the kid into the office, where Wolfe waited in his chair, hands folded, eyes half-lidded like he'd never gone to bed in the first place. "Mr. Trammell," he said. "Sit." Jonas did. He put the case on his lap, but didn't open it. "You tampered with Miss Vale's rose," Wolfe said, wasting no time. "You claimed it was stable. It wasn't." Jonas swallowed. "It wasn't sabotage. I swear. I thought I'd improved the scent profile. I didn't realize that it would destroy the aromatic output entirely." "I followed the chain," Jonas said desperately. "My version retained the same genetic markers. I tested it on a parallel sample. It smelled better, richer. I thought I could submit it as hers. She'd win, and then I'd show her it was my improvement. We'd publish it together. Instead, it bloomed empty," Wolfe said. "And you ran." Jonas covered his face. "She would have fired me. Worse, she would have told everyone I'd ruined the line." "And Lena Farrow?" Wolfe asked. Jonas blinked. "She warned me not to try it, said it wasn't ready. But I wanted to prove something. To her. No. To Miranda. To everyone. I've worked under her shadow for 3 years. I just wanted to contribute by deceiving her," Wolfe said dryly. Jonas's voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't think it was deception. I thought it was enhancement. And when the rose lost its scent, I tried to fix it," Jonas said. "I went back that night to swap the bloom, but Sylvie was still there. I couldn't get past her, so I left. Lena found me at my apartment the next morning. She told me to lay low." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Did she assist you in disappearing?" Jonas hesitated. "She found the place for me, said to wait until she could talk to Miranda. She wanted to handle it quietly." "Did she offer to take the credit for the repair?" "No. She was mad, but more scared than angry. Said I'd started something people might want to use. She took one of the failed buds to analyze it." Wolfe made a note in his small ledger. "And what is in that case, Mr. Trammell?" Jonas glanced at it, reluctant. Then, slowly, he unlatched it and opened the lid. Inside were a stack of handwritten lab notes, 3 sealed vials, and a small plastic container holding the severed stem of a 3rd rose. This one wilted, but still faintly fragrant. "That's the control," he said. "The one I used to prove the enhancement before trying it on Miranda's sample." Wolfe studied it from across the desk. "You will surrender all of this to me, temporarily?" Jonas nodded, defeated. "Yes, sir." "Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said, "take these to the lab in the safe." I did as instructed. When I returned, Jonas was sipping the hot cocoa Fritz had prepared. He looked about 12 years old in that chair, and Wolfe, to his credit, didn't press further. "Mr. Trammell," he said, "you are a fool, but not a villain. You tampered with proprietary work in the hope of earning admiration, and instead caused embarrassment. Your crime is ambition, poorly timed." Jonas stared at the carpet. "You will remain here for the night," Wolfe continued. "In the morning we will arrange a meeting with Miss Vale. If she elects to prosecute, so be it. If not, she won't," Jonas whispered. "She's not like that." "You hope she is not," Wolfe said. "That is not the same thing." I left him there and followed Wolfe to the dining room. Fritz had prepared an omelette, late. Yes, but Wolfe believed in nourishment after revelation. As we ate, I asked, "So what now?" "Now," Wolfe said, "we ensure that Miss Farrow does not abscond with Jonas's failed formula and attempt to salvage it in her own name. You think she would? She is intelligent, ambitious, and already demonstrated a willingness to obscure the truth. She may see value in the sequence. Value Jonas cannot claim without risk." I frowned. "Should we confront her?" "No," Wolfe said. "We will bait her." I stopped with a fork halfway to my mouth. "You mean leak the rose is worth something?" "No," Wolfe said with a faint smile. "We will leak that Jonas intends to revise and resubmit it with Wolfe's backing. That ought to smoke her out." Wolfe nodded. "If she comes sniffing around, we'll know her intentions. And if she doesn't, Well, the absence of curiosity can be revealing in itself. He reached for his beer and took a sip. The rose did not smell right, he murmured, but the ambition behind it, that reeked from the beginning. I lifted my glass to that. Tomorrow, we'd see who wanted the formula more, and how far they'd go to make it theirs. The next morning, Wolfe didn't touch his eggs. That might not sound like a seismic event, but when a man schedules his breakfast as precisely as the tides, you notice when the yolks go cold. He was silent through Fritz's brisk recitation of the menu, and he only nodded when I offered to make the first call. It was all part of the bait. By 9, I was on the line with a contact at the Botanical Review, feeding them a tidbit I claimed came from an unofficial source close to the Westmore Prize deliberations. That source me, of course, hinted that Jonas Trammell, once assistant to Miranda Vale, had created an advanced olfactory sequence that was being re-evaluated after initial tests. I used words like breakthrough, controversial, and scientifically significant, the kind of language that makes certain people come running with contracts and microscopes. By 10:30, Lena Farrow had called my phone. Her voice was crisp, tight. "Archie, I saw something in the review's blog feed. Is it true? Jonas is submitting something." I kept it breezy. "Looks like. Wolfe believes there's something salvageable in the sequence. A few corrections and it might even rival the original formula." Silence. Then I thought he was going to disappear. That was the agreement. That was before he got his confidence back. "Where is he?" "Oh, now come on, Lena," I said, giving it just enough bite. "You really think I'd answer that? I need to talk to him. That's going to be Wolfe's call. You want a meeting? It'll be in the office. With him listening." More silence. Then she sighed. "Fine. This afternoon. 1 o'clock. And Lena? Come clean. You try to dance, he'll make you sit down." She hung up without another word. I returned to the office. Wolfe was reclining, eyes shut, the tips of his fingers just touching. He looked like a cross between a Roman senator and a cat conserving energy before a hunt. "She bit," I said. "She'll be here at 1. "Good," he murmured. "She will reveal herself." Jonas, who had just finished a cautious breakfast under Fritz's watchful eye, was seated in the red chair. He looked a little more alive than he had last night. Hair combed, eyes clearer, but still resembled a man afraid to breathe too loudly. "You sure this is safe?" he asked. "She might try to take the papers. She might try to take credit," I said, "which is worse. But Wolfe won't let either happen." Jonas shook his head slowly. I don't want to ruin her, Archie. Lena's not bad. She's ambitious, but she's... Don't." I cut in. "That's how every story ends, with a sucker holding the bag. She coached you into manipulating the formula, then told you to run when it failed. That's not ambition. That's damage control." Wolfe interrupted us with a grunt. "Mr. Trammell, remain here during the interview. I want her to see you, hear you. But you will say nothing unless I instruct otherwise. Is that clear?" Jonas nodded. "Yes, sir." By Weinrosera Trapp, Lena Farrow was back in the brownstone, dressed in charcoal gray and calm as a lake in winter. If she was nervous, she wore it under several layers of professional detachment. Her hands were folded over a leather folio, and she entered the office like it was a boardroom she intended to dominate. "Mr. Wolfe," she said, offering a polite nod. "Mr. Goodwin, Jonas." She looked at Jonas for a long moment. His eyes flicked to the floor. Wolfe didn't rise. "Miss Farrow, you've come to inquire about the rumored revival of Mr. Trammell's formula." She smiled faintly. "I came to speak with Jonas. I was concerned." "No," Wolfe said flatly. "You came to secure access, possibly authorship. You see value in the sequence, despite its failure. You believe with enough adjustment it may be marketable." Lena tilted her head. "That's quite an accusation." "It is not an accusation," Wolfe said, "if one possesses the proof, Mr. Goodwin." I stood and retrieved the envelope Wolfe had prepared that morning. It contained copies of Jonas's original notes, the error logs, and a small typed memo that Lena had written to Jonas 6 months prior. suggesting a restructuring of olfactory chains A and B to better support volatile expression. It was nothing damning on its own, but in context it made it clear she'd been pushing this experiment far longer than she'd admitted. She scanned it, and for the first time since entering, lost the mask. Her mouth thinned. Those were theoretical exercises. You pushed him to make them real, Wolfe said. You knew the risks. You let him take the fall. I didn't tell him to substitute the rose, she said. That was his decision. Ah, Wolfe said, but afterward you arranged his disappearance. You took one of the failed samples to analyze, and now that the formula may have future value, you are here to claim a share. I'm protecting Jonas. You're protecting your investment. Her jaw clenched. Jonas looked up, stunned. Lena. Wolfe raised a hand. Quiet, Mr. Tremel. She turned to Jonas, her voice tight. I never wanted to use you. I wanted to partner with you. You have talent, but no edge. You needed someone who could defend your work. I needed someone who wouldn't let me take the blame. Jonas said quietly. You told me to disappear, because if you stayed, Miranda would have destroyed you. And now you want in, he said. Because Wolfe thinks there's value. Wolfe leaned back, satisfied. There it is. Lena looked between us, realizing she'd overplayed her hand. I suppose, she said coldly. This is where you hand everything to Miranda and pretend the boy's a saint. No, Wolfe said. This is where we document Jonas's role as the originator of the failed modification, clarify your involvement in encouraging it, and let Miss Vale decide whether she wishes to prosecute or reabsorb him under full disclosure. You can't be serious. I am always serious, Miss Farrow. Unlike some, I do not gamble with reputations to test a hypothesis. She stood. This isn't over. No, Wolfe agreed. It is merely documented. She left without another word. After she'd gone, Jonas looked like he'd aged in reverse, sagging, then breathing easier. Thank you, he said. Wolfe only sniffed. Do not thank me yet. You will speak to Miss Vale tonight. If she refuses to forgive your interference, you must accept that. Jonas nodded. I understand. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, inform Miss Vale. Ask her to come. And what if she wants blood? Wolfe closed his eyes. Then she shall have it, provided she can prove her claim is untainted by the sin of delegation. I blinked. Meaning, he said. She left Jonas alone with the formula for too long. Some of this is on her. That night, Miranda Vale sat across from Jonas in the same red chair he'd occupied all day. Her posture was stiff, but her voice, when it came, was softer than expected. I thought you'd betrayed me, she said. I was trying to impress you, Jonas said. I failed. You nearly cost me the prize. I'll never touch your work again. She didn't respond for a while. Then she stood. You'll stay on, she said. As a researcher. Not a collaborator. Not for now. He nodded. Thank you. She turned to Wolfe. Was that all you needed? Yes, Wolfe said. She left without another word. Jonas turned to Wolfe, stunned. Why would she forgive me? She recognized the guilt, Wolfe said. And perhaps the talent behind it. After Jonas had gone to bed, I poured us both a drink. So what now? Now, Wolfe said, we let the prize committee bungle their decision, and we returned to silence. He lifted his glass. The world of flowers, he said, is full of ambition. Fortunately, ours is not. I clinked his glass. But I knew better. When it came to ambition, Wolfe had just chosen the moral kind. And that, in the end, was far rarer than any rose. The brownstone was quiet again, the way Wolfe liked it. No perfumed intrusions, no ambitious geneticists, and no floral melodramas flowering in the office. After Lena Farrow's departure and Miranda Vale's grudging reconciliation with Jonas, Wolfe had declared himself temporarily disinterested in all things botanical. He retreated to his orchids, with the air of a man returning to a realm where nature behaved as expected, without ego, sabotage, or failed scent profiles. But if there's one thing life with Wolfe has taught me, it's this. The moment you think a case is settled is exactly when something gets dug up you wish had stayed buried. It happened the next afternoon. I was in the front room, reviewing invoices and considering whether I could justify expensing the replacement of 2 shirts. Jonas had permanently ruined by dripping some unpronounceable enzyme down my sleeve. Fritz was polishing the silver, whistling something obscure in a minor key, when the mail came. The envelope was hand-delivered and unmarked except for the words Mr. Nero Wolfe, personal. The handwriting was elegant. A little too elegant. Wolfe has a soft spot for calligraphy, the way a cat has for finches, so I brought it straight to him. He was in the plant rooms. I waited at the threshold like a boy with bad news. This arrived, I said. No return address. He took it, turned it once in his hand, then sliced it open with the small knife he kept in the soil drawer. His eyes scanned the single sheet. Then again, I waited. Damnation, he said. That was a step above his usual grunt. I moved closer. It's a letter, he said, from a member of the Westmore judging panel. A man I know to be discreet, and until now sane. I took it from him. It was unsigned, typed, and brief. Mr. Wolfe, be aware that Miranda Vale's submission has already been selected to receive the Westmore Prize. Certain panelists, including myself, believe this decision has been influenced by an unacknowledged consultation between Miss Vale and Edwin Fell prior to the formal judging process. I regret my inability to intervene. I send this to you in confidence. I stared at it. So Vale wins. But maybe because Fell pulled strings. Wolfe nodded slowly. Which changes everything. Changes what? I asked. We already solved the case. The rose was sabotaged by accident. Jonas confessed. Miranda forgave him. Lena's been neutralized. Yes, Wolfe said. And in the process we allowed Miranda to reassert control over her submission. She replaced the failed bloom with the twin. The one we had delivered here. I froze. You don't think? I don't think, Wolfe said, that the judging panel was meant to smell the true rose. I think Miranda took advantage of the confusion and the sympathy. She substituted the twin quietly, claimed it was always hers, and let Jonas take the fall. That's not just strategy, I said. That's fraud. Indeed. He moved to the intercom and summoned Fritz. Coffee. And Mr. Goodwin's sandwich. No onion. Then he turned to me. We must confirm whether Fell intervened. You'll visit him again. I sighed. What am I looking for? Panic, Wolfe said. Or pride. Either will do. I found Fell that evening at a fundraiser for urban agriculture, drinking champagne and offering critiques on rooftop irrigation to people too rich to know he was insulting them. He spotted me over the shoulder of a hedge-fondling councilwoman and gave me a smile that resembled an allergy attack. Mr. Goodwin, he said. Still chasing ghosts. I'm here on behalf of a friend who believes in roses, I said. And in transparency. Wolfe sent you, of course. I heard Miranda Vale's getting the prize. Fell raised his flute. A triumph of horticulture. Funny. Word is she consulted you before the panel made its decision. That got him. Not much, but enough. His eyes blinked once, slow and uncertain. She asked for my opinion on the aromatic viability of her strain. Off the record. You gave it. I gave her the courtesy of a reply. It was not binding. And yet, I said, she submitted a flawless bloom. Just days after the first one failed. Fell said nothing, but his foot tapped once, beneath the hem of his impeccable trousers. Was it the twin? I couldn't possibly know. Did you smell it? He paused. Then gave up. It wasn't the same. That was all I needed. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe took the update in silence. Then he asked for the twin rose, still stored in our cold cabinet, and inhaled deeply from its blossom. Fragrant, strong. The original formula, unaltered, he said. Jonas never touched this one, and that's what was shown to the panel. Which means, Wolfe said, Miss Vale has claimed a prize based on a lie. Think she did it out of desperation? No. Strategy. She saw her assistant's failure as a liability and an opportunity. She knew the twin could win, so she hid the failure and rewrote the narrative. Then the case isn't solved, I said. Wolfe shook his head. It is concluded, but not resolved. That night he had me invite Miranda back to the brownstone under the pretense of returning Jonas's notes. She arrived in a dark green coat, hair pinned back, lips pressed into that thin, pragmatic line of hers. Wolfe waited until she sat, then placed the rose box on the desk between them. "This," he said, "is the rose that won the Westmore Prize." She looked at it, then at him. "Yes." "No," he said. "This is the rose Jonas cultivated under your father's formula. The other, the one submitted initially, was altered. It lost its scent. You replaced it with this." She held his gaze. "And what will you do with that deduction?" "Nothing," Wolfe said. Her brow furrowed. "But," he continued, "you will not continue to lie to Jonas. You will acknowledge that you used his mistake to your advantage, that your forgiveness was self-serving, and you will split the prize money with him." That broke her composure. "You're blackmailing me." "No," Wolfe said mildly. "I'm appealing to your vanity. You wish to be seen as your father's heir. Then conduct yourself with his integrity." She stared at him, then, slowly, nodded. "I'll write him a check." "No," Wolfe said. "You will write him a letter. With the truth." She left without another word. After the door closed, Wolfe sighed, deeply, and not from exertion. "It is rare," he said, "to find a flower that smells sweet without concealment. Even in this room." I nodded. "You ever think about switching to cactus?" He almost smiled. And with that, the brownstone was quiet again. For real this time. The roses boxed, the notes archived, the lies disarmed. Dinner that night was trout. Wolfe was ravenous, and I, for once, was content not to ask what he was thinking, because I already knew. Some cases aren't about catching villains. They're about making sure the truth doesn't get buried deeper than the roots. The next morning, the sun broke through a haze of cloud and spilled across the parquet floor of Wolfe's office, lighting the rug like a stage. If I'd been inclined toward poetry, I might have said it looked like a spotlight, and Wolfe, predictably, was already center stage. He sat in his chair, with the serene heaviness of a man who'd just performed a moral lobotomy on two very clever people, and was waiting for his next cup of coffee. Fritz obliged, setting it down with a silver spoon and the faintest raise of one eyebrow. He, too, had sensed that something had shifted. Wolfe didn't speak right away, so I broke the silence. Mail came. Another bouquet from that retired couple in Montclair. "They think you saved their dog from a cyanide biscuit." Wolfe grunted. Jonas also left a note. He's accepted Miranda's letter and agreed to split the prize funds. Says he's going back to school part-time. Wants to study genomic ethics. Wolfe raised both brows. I handed him the note, and he read it with the concentration of a man reviewing an opera program for typos. "He may yet develop sense," Wolfe muttered. "Or at least a decent lab coat." He set the note down, folded with precise fingers. "Mr. Goodwin, when I allowed this case into the brownstone, I suspected deception, but I underestimated the layers." "You mean Jonas, Lena, Miranda, or Fell?" "All of them," Wolfe said. "Each held a thread, none of them a full cloth. Miss Farrow, ambitious but cautious, manipulated Jonas as a proxy. Jonas, insecure and eager, reached too far. Miss Farrow, opportunistic, capitalized on his failure to protect her legacy, and Mr. Fell played courtier while whispering poison." I finished. "Yeah, they make orchid competitions look like kindergarten." "There is little difference," Wolfe said. "Except orchids are incapable of vanity." I smiled. "I'd frame that for your tombstone. But it's not exactly warm." "I do not require warmth," Wolfe said, sipping his coffee. "Only silence, which, regrettably, is not to be had." Because right on cue the doorbell rang. I glanced at Wolfe. "Expecting someone?" "No, I went to the front door expecting a courier or another apologetic scientist bearing chocolate-covered gratitude. Instead, it was a tall, slim man in a gray suit, dark-rimmed glasses, and the kind of expression that says he's here to complicate your afternoon. "Mr. Goodwin?" he asked. "That depends. My name is Philip Eddington. I represent the Westmore Prize Association. I'd like a word with Mr. Wolfe." My mental alarm bells clanged once, gently but persistently. What kind of word? A private one, preferably regarding recent rumors of procedural misconduct involving this year's selection. I showed him in. Wolfe looked up and offered a silent nod as Eddington entered, removed his gloves, and took the offered chair like he had every right in the world to be there. "Mr. Wolfe," he began, "I understand you've had some dealings with Miss Miranda Vale." "Indeed. Some of our board members have raised concerns about irregularities in her submission." "Then you are slow," Wolfe said, "but not stagnant." Eddington cleared his throat. "We received an anonymous letter yesterday, suggesting that the rose submitted for judgment was not the same one originally filed for the prize. There are even claims that the submission was altered, genetically manipulated before being quietly substituted." I said nothing. "Wolfe, let the silence do its work. Do you know anything about this?" Eddington asked. Wolfe met his gaze. "Yes, and you are willing to testify to that effect?" "No." Eddington blinked. "I beg your pardon?" I said, "No, Mr. Eddington. I do not report to the Westmore Association, nor do I have any desire to lend my voice to an institution that allowed itself to be influenced by vanity and ineptitude. You chose your panel. You permitted Fell's involvement despite his known history. Now, having been misled, you come here to clean your conscience with my rag. You will receive no affidavit from me. I have satisfied myself that the matter has been resolved between the parties directly affected." Eddington looked at me, then back to Wolfe. "Are you saying there was fraud?" Wolfe pursed his lips. "There was a substitution, but no fraud is complete without material gain. If Miss Vale agrees to share credit and proceeds with the assistant whose work formed the basis for the flawed bloom, and if the association chooses to overlook its own negligence, I see no reason to upend your prize ceremony." Eddington stood slowly. "You're protecting her." "I am protecting equilibrium," Wolfe said. "You want scandal, Mr. Eddington. I want silence. I am willing to accept a quiet retraction of her prize, if that satisfies your need for correction." Eddington studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded, as though recognizing the futility of debating philosophy with a man who grew orchids to avoid people. "I'll relay your position to the board," he said. "Do?" He left as neatly as he arrived. I walked him to the door. Outside, a black town car waited, engine running. Eddington stepped in without a word. The car disappeared down 35th Street like a metaphor Wolfe wouldn't care for. Back in the office, I said, "You think they'll strip the award?" "No. They'll revise the language. A joint recognition, a quiet reshuffling, the illusion of integrity." I sank into my chair. "You just gave them an exit." "I gave them a lesson," Wolfe said, "about consequences without headlines." "So this is over?" Wolfe reached for his beer. "It is concluded." Fritz entered, bearing a tray with fresh glasses. On it sat a small white card, edged in crimson. "More flowers?" "No," Fritz said. "A note." I took it and read aloud. "Mr. Wolfe, thank you for seeing past failure and past ego. I will not forget your discretion. J." I passed it to Wolfe. He read it and grunted. "Well," he said, "there may be hope. Should I call it a win?" "You may call it what you like." We sat in silence. The orchids bloomed in their rooms. The city resumed its slow breathing. Later, as I filed the case into our locked cabinet under botany, Vale and High, I caught Wolfe watching the sunset shift against the office walls. "You know," I said, "for a man who claims to despise the chaos of humanity, you spend a lot of time untangling it." Wolfe didn't turn. "Chaos is inevitable. Clarity is optional." I prefer to provide the latter. I gave him a nod. And that was that. No arrests. No headlines. Just a rose that didn't smell right. A lie that almost bloomed into something worse, and a quiet return to order, curated, catalogued, and filed. The way Wolfe liked it. And the way, if I'm honest, I've come to like it too. It was 2 days after Eddington's visit, and for the first time in what felt like a month, things had gone still. The brownstone was functioning on its usual diet of routine and ritual. Fritz's roast duck was back on the dinner table. The orchids were misted, clipped and fed with the kind of reverence usually reserved for royalty. Wolfe had returned to his reading, German philosophy, this week, and I was halfway through cleaning out the filing cabinet, discovering old case notes that smelled faintly of ink and ancient suspicion. Then at 11:04 a.m., just as I'd finished labeling a manila folder Veil Sabotage, Genetic, Allege, and was debating whether to add a See Also Roses cross-reference, the phone rang. Wolfe was in the plant rooms. I picked up. Nero Wolfe's residence. Archie Goodwin speaking. The voice on the other end was female, steady and unfamiliar. Mr. Goodwin, my name is Ruth Lanning. I'm a former assistant to Edwin Fell. I was told you handled the recent matter regarding the Westmore Prize. I handled a lot of things, I said cautiously. What's your interest? I was let go last year, abruptly. Fell accused me of misusing proprietary software, but it was nonsense. I've recently discovered something I think you and Mr. Wolfe should see. What kind of something? A duplicate of a Bloom sequence, registered under my login after I was terminated. Now that got my attention. You're saying Fell cloned a formula using your credentials? I believe he copied the Veil sequence from a digital archive he wasn't supposed to access and buried it under my account to avoid detection. It would explain why he knew so much about Miranda's work before the submission. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Why are you telling us now? Because I've been following the aftermath. I saw the announcement of the prize. I read the quiet rewording, and I realized someone still hasn't told the full truth. Fell's manipulation didn't stop at Jonas. That's when Wolfe came in from the plant rooms, drying his hands with the obsessive care of a man avoiding even a fingerprint on a phalaenopsis stem. Wolfe, I said, covering the mouthpiece. New voice. Name's Ruth Lanning, ex-assistant to Fell. Says she's got evidence Fell used her access to replicate Miranda's sequence before the judging. Planted the file to frame her. Wants to show us proof. Wants to show us proof. Wolfe's brow lowered like an incoming storm system. Invite her. I returned to the phone. Miss Lanning, Mr. Wolfe would like to see you in person. Today. Noon. I'll be there, she said, and hung up. At precisely noon, of course, she arrived. Ruth Lanning was in her early 30s, with an efficient dark bob, and the watchful, tightly wound demeanor of someone who had once believed in professional boundaries and now wore betrayal like a second skin. She came in carrying a laptop and a slim file folder. Wolfe motioned her into the red chair without speaking. He didn't offer her coffee. That was always a bad sign for someone else. I've recreated the digital trail, she said, opening the laptop on Wolfe's desk. See this? She pointed to a time-stamped log dated 4 days after her dismissal. It showed a download of genetic profile files, matching Miranda Veil's Rose sequencing pattern, archived under Lanning's terminated employee account. Fell used my credentials after the termination request was filed, but before the access cutoff took effect. At the delay, happens more often than it should. She clicked another tab. Here's the same sequence. Adjusted, different naming convention, but the same base architecture. It was filed under Fell's private research folder 2 days later, labeled Petal Veil Mod Free C. Wolfe leaned forward. Why now? Because I believed someone else would expose him, she said. I thought Miss Veil might, or Jonas, or your investigation. But everything's been swept under, and I've got job offers again. I want to clear my name before someone asks the wrong questions. Wolfe nodded once. A gesture of faint approval. You understand the implication. Fell knew the formula was failing. When Jonas's version collapsed, Miranda must have panicked. But he already had the original. He could have fed her the twin, under the table without documenting the transfer. Or he could have submitted it himself, unofficially. Either way, he covered his tracks. Wolfe reached for the file. Inside were hard copies, prints of the sequence, a termination letter, and internal emails referencing the delay in credential removal. When she was done, Wolfe spoke softly. "Miss Lanning, if what you claim is true, the prize board may be forced to revisit its entire process." She nodded. "That's all I wanted." Wolfe looked at me. "Mr. Goodwin." "Yes, you will revisit Mr. Fell." I groaned. "Do I get hazard pay this time?" "No," he said. "You get satisfaction." Ruth Lanning left with a copy of Wolfe's card, and the assurance that if things got messy, we'd point the right direction. Quietly. An hour later, I was in Edwin Fell's rooftop greenhouse again. This time without an invitation. Bryce tried to intercept me. I brushed past him. Fell was in the rear chamber, fine-tuning the lighting system above a bed of bluish tulips. He probably described to his friends as emotive. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, turning. "I don't recall." "Relax," I said. "This isn't a social call. I came to talk about Petal Vale Mod." He froze. I waited. Then, that file was theoretical. No, it was a copy of Miranda's original formula, downloaded using Ruth Lanning's credentials after she was canned. I've seen the timestamp. She fabricated it. "Nope. You did." He stepped back. "You can't prove." "We can. Wolfe has the files. So does the Westmore board, as of 10 minutes ago." His jaw clenched. "This isn't your business. It was the moment you tried to steal credit for a formula that never belonged to you, then manipulated your way into the judging panel to ensure the right rose bloomed on the podium. I had no motive. You had every motive to preserve your image, to cover your failure, to make sure that if Miranda flinched, you could claim you'd been guiding her all along. Maybe you fed her the twin bloom. Maybe she found it herself. Either way, you stood to benefit from her win or her loss." Fell's shoulders sagged. "Get out," he said. "Gladly. You'll be hearing from a few associations that care a lot more about codes of ethics than Wolfe does. Personally, I hope they bury you in compost." Back at the brownstone, I laid it all out for Wolfe, who listened with the focus of a man solving a particularly nasty equation. "So," I said, "Vale, Jonas, Lena, and now Fell. You sure this case is ever going to be over?" Wolfe finished his beer and set it down with finality. "It is now." "How do you figure?" "Because now," Wolfe said, "the truth exists in full. Whether others act upon it is immaterial. The deception has been revealed. The rose at last is bare." He closed his eyes. And that was Wolfe's version of closure. Not noise, not retribution, but the quiet arrangement of facts, until no lie could find a foothold. We didn't send any letters. We didn't place any calls. The world would correct itself or it wouldn't. But Wolfe had corrected the record. And that, in his book, was the only bloom worth cultivating. It was a Thursday evening when the final petal fell. Not literally, of course. The Vale roses Wolfe had stored in our cold cabinet were still pristine, untouched by anything as crass as time. But metaphorically, everything had come to rest. The players had all taken their final bows. Jonas had accepted his rebuke and his partial redemption. Miranda Vale had retained her prize with a modified footnote and a clean conscience, or at least a quiet one. Lena Farrow had gone silent, likely calculating her next career move in a city that forgave ambition as long as it wore new shoes. And Edwin Fell, well, he'd gone subterranean. Rumor had it he was taking a sabbatical in Europe, which probably meant he was hiding in plain sight behind ivy and regret. Wolfe, of course, had emerged from the whole affair unblemished, and worse, slightly smug. He had said all along that the rose hadn't smelled right, and now every theory, every motive, every silent transaction had bloomed in exactly the way he'd predicted. Not through action, but but through control, the quiet, relentless peeling of layers until the truth lay exposed like the center of an unguarded blossom. It should have ended there, but it didn't. Because at 6:15 p.m., as Fritz was serving duck à l'orange with haricot vert, so perfect they should have been sculpted, the phone rang. I reached for it. Wolfe grunted. "Tell them to call back." "They might not," I said, and picked up. Goodwin speaking. The voice was familiar. Miranda Vale, Tito, controlled. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "I received something today," she said. "It was sent anonymously to my lab's mailing address. No return label. No note." "What was it?" "A rose." I waited. "Not one of mine. Not one I've ever cultivated. And it smells off." "Off how?" "Wrong. Like it's trying to imitate something it doesn't understand. It's the scent you'd get if someone reverse-engineered a memory of a rose." Wolfe's attention sharpened. I could feel it without looking at him. "Could be a prank," I said. "Could be," she replied, except it came with a single click tag attached to the stem. "What did it say?" "One word," she said. "Recompense." I paused. "Will be over." She hesitated. "You'll come personally?" "No. Wolfe won't leave the house unless the gas main's ruptured under his chair. I'll come. I'll bring a sample kit." I hung up. Wolfe waited. "Well?" I gave him the summary. When I got to the word on the tag, he leaned back in his chair like it had said confession. "What does that mean to you?" I asked. "That someone, despite all evidence, believes the balance remains unsettled." "Fell." "No," Wolfe said. "He is too vain." "Miss Farrow?" "Possible. Or a party we've underestimated." "Who?" Wolfe tapped a finger against the armrest. "I will not know until you retrieve the bloom." So I did. Miranda's lab at Vale Floriculture was empty, except for her and the rose, which she had placed in a sealed sample tube like it was radioactive. She didn't offer coffee. She didn't ask me how Wolfe was. She just handed over the specimen like it was a burden she wanted out of her hands. "I don't like puzzles," she said. "Not anymore." "You're in the wrong line of work," I replied. The rose was pale pink, with an unusual gradient toward near white at the base of each petal. At first glance it seemed ordinary, but as I opened the container and leaned in, I understood what she meant. It didn't smell wrong. It smelled uncanny, like an impression rather than a fact, a ghost of a scent. Synthetic, yet trying not to be. I resealed it quickly. "I want to know where it came from," she said. "You and Wolfe both." Back at the brownstone, I handed over the sealed tube. Wolfe did not open it immediately. He studied it, like it might whisper a name if he stared long enough. "It's an echo," he said at last. "A counterfeit created by someone who believes they owed or were owed something more." "You still think it's Lena?" "She lacks subtlety," he said. "This is a message, not a threat. It is apology in disguise." "Jonas?" "He has neither the means nor the nerve." "Then who?" Wolfe didn't answer immediately. He motioned for me to open the notes. Ruth Lanning had left behind the duplicate files Fell had generated, including the Valemod variants. I retrieved them from the case drawer and spread them out on the desk. Wolfe read in silence. His eyes moved left to right, slower than usual. "Then this wasn't one of Fell's copies?" "No, no," Wolfe said. "This version shows deviations even from Jonas's modified sequence, slight shifts in the aromatic layering, timing of bloom, and color fade, which means someone else made a copy, based on the failed version, someone who hoped to correct it." After all was said and done, it hit me. "Lena," Wolfe nodded. "This is her final draft, not for glory, for closure." "But why send it to Miranda?" "To prove she could make it work," Wolfe said. "To show that the failure wasn't in the formula, but in its execution. She's saying, you blamed the wrong thing." And the word recompense. Wolfe looked at the rose, perhaps not to Miranda, perhaps to Jonas. I stared at the bloom. "So what do we do?" "Nothing," Wolfe said. We let it lie. You don't want to respond? I already have, Wolfe said. By preserving the truth. By restoring the correct order. The rest belongs to those who wish to rewrite it. He gestured toward the specimen tube. Store it, catalog it, label it appropriately. I took the rose, sealed it, and filed it in the climate-controlled cabinet beneath the failed and successful samples. Later that night, as I sat in the office with Wolfe sipping brandy, I asked him, "Do you ever get tired of games like this?" Wolfe considered. "Only when the players refuse to acknowledge they're playing. And if they do, then the game ends," he said. "And justice, moral, if not legal, is served." I raised my glass to moral justice. He lifted his to clarity. The city breathed beyond the windows. The brownstone stood still. The case was closed. No fanfare, no headlines. Just a rose that didn't smell right, until it did. It was a week after the arrival of the anonymous rose, and you'd be forgiven for thinking the case was over. By all appearances, it was. Jonas had resumed his work, discreetly, and with a humility rare for a man of science. Miranda, true to her word and Wolfe's insistence, had split the prize money and acknowledged her assistant's contribution in a quiet public statement that read like it had been rewritten 13 times. Edwin Fell had not reappeared, and Lena Farrow remained a name only whispered. No lawsuits, no countersuits, no new ventures, just absence. But there was one thing still unsettled. One clue. If you could call it that, Wolfe had not spoken of since the day he'd tucked that strange final rose away in our cold cabinet. Recompense. I hadn't pushed him on it. Wolfe doesn't like to be asked what he already plans to answer. And sure enough, that answer came, without warning, on a Friday afternoon. We were in the office. I was updating case records, while Wolfe was pretending not to nap. Then, with the suddenness of a man emerging from thought rather than slumber, he opened his eyes and said, "Archie, fetch the 3 roses." I didn't ask which ones. I went to the cabinet, unlocked the chilled compartment, and retrieved all 3, the twin bloom, pristine, pure, the one that had won Miranda her prize, the failed bloom, odorless and ghostly, and the final bloom, the uncanny echo sent by an unseen hand. I arranged them on his desk. Wolfe regarded them as if they'd been assembled for cross-examination. "The truth," he said, "does not lie in what these roses are. It lies in who they speak for." He pointed to the first, the original, unmodified, the result of Lionel Vale's careful work. It is what Miranda inherited and presented to the world as her own, and what she ultimately returned to under pressure. She used it not for deception, but to maintain face. He tapped the second. The failed experiment, Jonas's error, pushed by Lena Farrow's ambition, born of desperation to contribute, to matter. Its failure was not criminal, but it was foolish. It carried the scent of overreach. That scent was nothing at all. Then he gestured toward the third. "This," he said, "is the apology, not to Miranda, not even to me, but to Jonas, Lena's attempt to correct what she had enabled. It is her final act in this saga, an untraceable, fragrant letter of guilt." I nodded. So she wanted him to know she could fix what she helped break. "Yes," Wolfe said. But she also wanted to prove that she hadn't been wrong, that the failure had been in Jonas's method, not her concept. She needed him to know her instincts were valid, even if her actions were not. "Think he'll ever find out?" "I suspect she intends him to," Wolfe said. "Perhaps not today, but someday, when he's ready." I was quiet for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been lingering since the beginning. "Wolfe, why did you take this case?" "It wasn't murder. No one paid us a cent. There were no headlines, no danger. Just a flower that didn't smell right." He closed his eyes. "It intruded," he said. "A rose that betrayed its purpose. A disruption not only to its environment, but to its meaning. The brownstone, my brownstone, was disturbed. The lie entered here, and you don't abide lies. Not when they masquerade as beauty," he said. I let that sit. Later, We had dinner, trout with tarragon. Wolfe was in excellent form, discussing the migration patterns of orchids in the Amazon with Fritz as if he'd personally escorted them. The roses were returned to their cabinet, sealed in cool, patient silence, a record of what had passed. When I turned off the lights in the office that night, I looked back once. 3 roses, 3 stories, 1 truth. In the end, Wolfe hadn't solved a mystery so much as untangled a morality. He didn't uproot the garden. He simply found the weed hiding in the scent, and made sure it wouldn't bloom again.